Good day, folks, and welcome to review number 76. Today, we're going to look at one of the strangest homages to G1 that I have seen from the Transformers line in recent years. It's a look at the Transformers Prime Beast Hunters Voyager Megatron. So, starting off looking at the packaging, we see that Megatron comes packaged in the standard Beast Hunters Voyager style packaging. You've got the large image of Predaking over here on the left, and then you have a smaller image of Megatron in his vehicle mode over here in the lower right. You also have the Beast Hunters logo here in the lower left. Back side of the packaging features images of Megatron in both robot and vehicle mode, as well as a little image down here across the bottom advertising Transformers Prime. One thing I'll point out, I forgot to mention on the front side, his sword is called the Tartarex Warp Sword, which I find kind of funny because you think fish, tartar sauce. Yeah, kind of works. The right side of the packaging features Megatron's tech specs down here at the bottom, a artwork image of Megatron in his new form, as well as a short little sentence here, which really doesn't tell you anything about why he's taken this new form. So here we have Megatron in his robot mode. And he's definitely different. There is not much here that's shared with his previous Voyager release, other than the basic skeleton parts, with upper arms, thighs, some joints here. Just about everything has been remolded, and if it wasn't obvious before what he was molded after, the instructions spell it out. His name in the instructions is Sharkticon Megatron, so he is obviously an homage to the G1 Sharkticon. The coloring just looks great here. It's part of the reason I picked this guy up, despite already having the mold. It's just he just looks so ridiculous, and ridiculous in a good way. But the paint job here is just awesome. The pinks, the purples, the blues, the metallic greens up here. It looks great. But anyway, just as with the other Voyager Megatron, articulation wise, he's got a ball jointed head, but it's still limited by the shape of the helmet here. You've got a fully ball jointed shoulder there. You've got your elbow, and there's a forearm swivel there. And you've got a little bit of articulation here in the wrist. No waist joint, but then you've got ball jointed hips, thigh swivel there, knee joint, and then no ankle articulation there. But overall, articulation wise, I mean, he's basically the same figure as the other one. There's just probably a little bit, I don't know, it's different the way the shoulder pieces affect arm articulation, but I'd say it kind of still works out to be about the same limitations there. So articulation wise, yeah, he's still pretty good. Now, for the most part, I really like the way they've done most of the remolds on this figure, with the exception of the head sculpt. They made his head with his mouth open, and I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just used to seeing Transformers figures with their mouths closed, but something about a Megatron walking around with his mouth hanging open just doesn't seem quite right. Seems like he's panting, or I don't know, has some other kind of issue. But while we're in this close-up view, I also wanted to point out this metallic metal paint on here. This is probably one of my favorite paint apps. It just looks so sharp. This green metallic they have on his shoulders. I can't say it enough. The paint job that they put on this figure. And I almost feel like they're trying to make up for the last couple years where we had so few paint apps or so poorly applied paint apps that they said, well, here's this figure. Look at all the paint apps we did here. So, uh, but again, yeah, that head sculpt is just an issue. So in the instructions, they actually do explain why Megatron looks the way he does. And it's because of the fact that he's laying in a coma, about to die, and his hand feels this weapon. And then when he wraps his hand around the weapon, he feels his body change into this new form here. The weapon, of course, on the box, as I mentioned, is called the Tartarex Warp Sword. And then in the instructions, it's also referred to as the Sharkticon Spear. But it's kind of a mech tech type weapon here, and I'll take this out to show you. With this, most of the time, I've not been a fan of these mech tech weapons, but I think someone finally listened to us a little bit and got this one right. Besides, you've got this kind of gun mode to start off with, and then you pull it and the blade flips out, which we've seen similar kind of weapons in the past. The big difference here is once you flip that out, you can move this handle piece down and actually lock it in place. So instead of just having the weapon flop back and forth, you actually have a sword that Megatron can use either that way, or you can put it in his hand that way. It's actually something that's usable versus just something that flips back and forth for the sake of flipping back and forth. So thank you, Hasbro, for finally listening to all our complaints about these mech tech weapons and finally doing one correctly. So, on to Megatron's Transformation. Now, seeing as how this is a remold of an existing figure, you would expect that the transformation would be nearly identical. Surprisingly, though, there are more differences here than one might imagine. Now, the first most obvious difference is that there is now a part that has been added to actually cover Megatron's head in vehicle mode. And this way you don't have to deal with him peeking out of the cockpit while as a vehicle. However, most of the differences in this figure from the original mold all stem from the fact that the tabs and tolerances that all seem to have problems on the original figure have been improved so that the tabs now fit properly and will actually hold together in both modes. In addition, they've added a clip to the chest halves, and this clip actually works in both robot and vehicle modes, which feels so much more satisfying than just having those two chest pieces float freely out in front of the vehicle. And I guess that feeling of satisfaction is a good way to sum up the differences in this figure's transformation from the original. Even though all of the pieces, all of the steps are functionally the same, this figure has a much better build to it and provides you with a much greater sense of satisfaction in the end. The only significant fault I can really note with this figure, at least as far as the transformation goes, has to do with the shoulder pieces in vehicle mode. While they have a better defined position on this figure than on the original, the added spikes and other bits sticking off of them can make it a little difficult to work around. But despite some of the ludicrous remolding on this figure, I have to say that because of some of the tolerance improvements, this figure transforms much better than the original Voyager Megatron. So here we have Megatron in his vehicle mode, and the overall shape of it's pretty much the same as the other Voyager Megatron, which I did not care for that vehicle at all. But there's just something so odd and off the wall about the way this thing looks that it's kind of endearing. The paint job again, they've hit it in all the right spots. You've got this funky looking shark fish head down here. A lot of the places where it tabs together, for some reason, it seems like it actually fits together better on this figure than it did on the original Megatron. So I think they may have just learned what worked and what didn't work with some of the tolerances before and improved that a little bit. You've also got this cool little Sharkticon emblem here, based off of the Decepticon logo there. So that's a pretty neat little feature. Again, you've got the same limitation though as the other one, where the underside is pretty hollow. There are no landing gear or anything else to support it underneath. So when you do set this thing down, it is just scraping along the ground. So there is that limitation. But yeah, I mean, as long as you don't look at this as being an airplane and look at this as being just some completely whacked out vehicle mode, it's actually kind of cool. It's not a great vehicle mode by any means, but like I said, it's just so far out there. It makes itself neat. The Transformers Prime, Beast Hunters, Voyager, Sharkticon Megatron is not going to be a figure for everyone. I can see why some people would be turned off by the design choices that have been made here. However, if you are into this ridiculous remold and ridiculous repaint, I think you will be pleasantly surprised. Because of all of the tolerance improvements, this figure ends up surpassing the original Voyager Megatron release as far as being a transforming figure. Add to that the great quality of the paint job, and I think you honestly have here one of the coolest figures from the Beast Hunters line.